Yep, okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Sydney Gonzales, and this is my project, the development of language and climate advocacy legislation. To set the stage, I wanted, okay, do your thing then. Okay, we got it. We're fine. I'm just pressing the wrong button. I haven't used this before. So humanity has known about climate change for nearly 90 years, yet we are producing more greenhouse gases than ever before. In 2019, before the COVID-19 global pandemic hit and stopped industries, we emitted 36.7 billion tons of CO2 into the atmosphere, which is 30 billion tons more than in 1950, double the 1977 emissions, and an additional 12 billion since 2000, the year I was born. So there have also been over 5 decades of multi-scale climate activism, from the World Trade Organization protest in Seattle with 40,000 activists to the global climate strikes of September 2019 with millions of people involved. The question then becomes, why are we still dealing with this problem with almost a century's worth of evidence and 50 years worth of public outcry? Some say the environmentalist organizations are the problem, as they have taken on the characteristics of the corporation they are protesting, competing for money and members, viewing the law as a game, and falling into the trap of media coverage. But Basso believes that the environment may have been better off if these leaders had been bolder, more diverse in class, race, and gender, less compromising, and less gentlemanly in the day-to-day dealings with adversaries. So my question is he right? To answer that question, I'm wrong. To answer that question, this study uses the institutional grammar tool to analyze a case study of the local Charleston organization, Charleston Climate Coalition, and 2 of their action items, the James Island and Charleston County climate resolutions. The passage of legislation is how activists can confirm the action steps from governments and can provide a clear unit of measurement for study. Our legislative system, is designed to force compromise and thusly innovation to hopefully provide the most holistic solutions to issues. However, in practice, is the final legislation actually successful in this task? So the institutional grammar tool is a coding method to code institutional statements, which I cannot read from there, and there's a huge glare happening over here. But basically, they are statements from the government that define actions. And so I have a lovely little color-coded thing going on here for you, because, for example, a statement like, employees must wash hands before returning to work or they will be fired. The attribute, employees, is who does the rule apply to or the statement apply to. The deontic is the words may, must, or must not. The aim is the specific actions defined in the statement. The object is optional, and it's the receiver of the action. Conditions are when and where the aim happens, and the or else are the consequences. And using those 6 components, we code things into shared strategies, norms, or rules, which of course you cannot see up there. So for example, the shared strategy is the weakest statement, and then a rule is the strongest statement because it includes the consequences and also the deontic. And then the norm only includes the deontic, and then shared strategy is basically just a sentence. So employees wash hands before returning to work is a shared strategy because we all assume that that is something that we all do. A norm version would be employees must wash hands before returning to work, and then the rule version would be employees must wash hands before returning to work or they will be fired. So for the case study, Charleston, South Carolina should be worried about climate change. It is a region that has dealt with years of constant tidal and rainfall flooding and an increased quantity and intensity of hurricanes and other severe weather events, and it is not projected to get better. Because of this, Charleston Climate Coalition was founded in September of 2019 from the crowds of the College of Charleston's climate rally, with Dr. Jen Wright and Belvin Olisoff taking the reins. The newly formed group started out with about 30 to 40 volunteer members, and within 6 months, they managed to get the town of James Island to pass a climate resolution, which later helped pass a Charleston County resolution. Nope, I did it wrong again. Work with me here. A resolution is a very specific type of legislation, as its goal is to show the official expression of the opinion or will of a legislative body. They are not intended to be permanent, enforceable, nor carry any weight. They are intended to have temporary effects and are usually used when passing a law is unfeasible. While these pieces of legislation are not meant for lasting change, CCC decided they were worth their time and effort because it forces governments to at least acknowledge that there is a climate crisis, that it is man-made and exacerbated, and the town needs to partner with other municipalities to create solutions. So my methods are copied from another study that did exactly what I was looking for, and I thought, why fix it if it ain't broke? So first step is to identify and disregard all definitions, titles, preambles, anything that's not an institutional statement. Second, we identify the sections and subsections that 4 units of analysis. Then we subdivide those, if necessary, into sentences, essentially. Then we code those using the Advocacy tool, and then we put those into the 3 categories. And then, when applicable, we imply components that were not originally in the statement, and then, of course, using multiple coders for intercoder reliability. And so, y'all can probably not see that very well, but there's no way to get that bigger because it's just too much information, and I had way too much data. So, essentially, there is all of those components written across the top, and this is the past James Island resolution, I believe, and so this is just what I ended up doing. It's confusing, there's a lot of it. So my results for the institutional grammar analysis, the James Island one looks much fancier because there was 14 drafts that I had available, and so we essentially started out with 27 institutional statements in total, and we ended up with, I believe, 8. And then the breakdown, the blue line is all of the total institutional statements in the document. The red line is all of the shared strategies, which again are the weakest form of institutional statement. The yellow line is the norms, and then there is not a single rule in any of these documents at any given point, but again, that is kind of the point of a resolution. And so obviously you can see the downward slope of the amount of norms and shared strategies, and then institutional statements in general. And then the county resolution, we only had 3 drafts of, and that second one is a barely, because the county council basically took everything behind doors and did not allow CCC to be involved in the drafting process, and so they did not have as many drafts involved. And so we started out with 43 institutional statements in the original, and we ended with 5. And 4 of those being shared strategies, 1 of which is a norm. And then that data ended up, even though it took me 7 years of my life to do, ended up only being summarized in 2 graphs. So I decided to make my life even harder and do a language analysis, where basically I compared each draft side by side, line by line, and I disregarded all changes that were grammatical or spelling based, and then I focused on all other significant changes, and I categorized them into 3 sections: added, rephrased, or moved. If a clause was new in its entirety, it was added. If the clause has any changes, which, as defined here, if it was removed, it was stricken through, and then if it is underlined, it is a new addition. That was put in the rephrased section, and then if it was completely removed, it was removed. And so these are just like my patterns that I got out of that, which, of course, I cannot see these. Y'all just gonna have to have me yell. So some deadlines were extended or removed. So instead of 60 days, it became something like 90 days, 120 days. Removal of social justice wording, such as justice requires that frontline and marginalized communities, which have historically borne the brunt of extractive fossil fuel economy, participate actively in the planning and implementation of this mobilization. That was completely removed. Removal of emergency language, such as restoring a safe and stable climate requires an emergency mobilization to it requires a climate mobilization. Inclusion of self-promoting language, such as whereas James Island must lead by example. Inclusion of responsibility spreading, such as we understand that the town of James Island is just one part of the great state of South Carolina. Removal of other entities' actions, such as in 2016, leaders recognized the urgent need to combat climate change by signing the Paris Agreement. And finally, specifying to restrict responsibilities, such as examples of municipal climate solutions include increasing the efficiency of our energy use to increasing the efficiency of our town's publicly owned buildings' energy use. which is fun. I enjoyed this part. And so in conclusion, I have a quote from Dr. Jen Wright in my interview with her, where one of the things I've realized while doing this kind of work in the South is that just getting people to say climate change is a win. Just getting the South to publicly and in writing use the words climate change, recognize that there is a man-made cause, that it is a crisis, that if we don't do something to change, there's going to be problems in the future. So some believe that organizations like CCC need to be stronger in their asks and remain steadfast in their lack of compromise. And others support CCC in their slow yet steady strategy. If CCC had done that, the legislation probably would not have passed, as that looked like what it was going to be. The county sustainability officer literally quit after the county resolution was passed. So that is obviously a hard ask. And the data does show that the language does get watered down. It's shortened, it lacks enforcement, and it essentially demands nothing from our governments. But legislation passed it all, which was the original goal. So CCC will continue their work on resolutions, but they will also expand their horizons to passing climate rights-based ordinances, which is a piece of legislation that allows for the municipality and residents of the municipality to sue any entity that can be shown to have demonstrable impact on the climate, which is a much stronger piece of legislation, but that also means that it is much harder to pass because the state of South Carolina does not like giving its citizens rights. That is not clearly outlined in the Constitution of South Carolina. So, and there also are just not as many climate rights-based ordinances in existence, and so it's harder to pull from and use as examples. So, that is her.